Town That Dreaded Sundown from 1976. That is a movie that has been in my crosshairs, good Lord, for years and years and years. And we finally sat down and watched it. Just now got done watching it like 2 minutes ago. And I've got a lot to say. First off, the reason this film was in my crosshairs, the reason I had known about it for so long is, for me, as a really young kid, I got into Friday the 13th, Halloween, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Those movies, I started watching those when I was, 8, 9, 10 years old on like AMC and like Sci-Fi when they used to do their Fear Fests and stuff like that. And, Friday the 13th Part 2 sees Jason Voorhees not wearing a hockey mask, but instead a sack on his head. And I always thought that was kind of interesting, kind of weird, kind of strange. But it is long time been rumored that it was, taken, or the idea was from The Town That Dreaded Sundown from 1976. And so, I never really knew if that's true or not, and no one has ever confirmed it, I don't think. But, for horror fans, not only are Friday the 13th films, universally loved and known, obviously, because of the sack from Friday the 13th Part 2. A lot of people are aware of The Town That Dreaded Sundown, and it's, definitely a cult film. Pretty low budget. I don't even know if it got a commercial release. I think it did back in the day, but it's such a bizarre film. It's definitely a slasher, and it's another one of those pre-Halloween slashers. And it's really interesting because it's a slasher film, but it's also almost like a documentary type deal, because unlike some slasher films, I'm not going to say all and most, but unlike a decent amount of slasher films, it's not subjected to a group of people in a remote location, but instead it's focused on a town, Texarkana, in the 40s, right? And it reminds me of a documentary in that it's supposed to be like a depiction of the events 30 years later. There's a narrator who kind of highlights some things throughout the movie, and you see a lot of footage of like police officers and detectives. There's not really any singular main character that I can think of. A few characters that do stand out would be Sparkplug, who at first I thought was like our bumbling protagonist. He's like, a young police officer just recently on the force, and he is just not good at his job. And had he been a police officer in Texarkana in 2020, he probably would be one of those ones who would probably drive up the racial tension in America. But anyway, offhand comment. I thought he was the protagonist, but no, he's just one of what is pretty much an ensemble cast. And there's a decent body count. I think it's 5. There are a few things that, kind of confuse me about the film. The acting, for the most part, it's pretty good. There are some moments where I'm just like, ooh, particularly during some of the more violent scenes. Some of the female actors will say some of the delivery was a little botched, but it is what it is. It's not a big deal for me. Acting in small spaces, if it's a little spotty, is not a big deal when it comes to somewhat obscure 70s cult horror films. But I would say the characters in the film are okay. I mean, none of them really stand out. Since it is kind of an ensemble cast, I would say Sparkplug sticks out for me because he's just an idiot. He's such an idiot. Like seriously, the dude does not know what the fuck he's doing in the slightest, and he's just getting roasted throughout the whole fucking movie, which is kind of funny. But I guess I kind of like the sheriff. He's like a badass or whatever. But the movie centers around this guy who is like killing young adults, teenagers, what have you, like makeout points, like lovers' lanes. And it takes place in the 40s. It takes place after World War II, like 1946. And the film came out in 1976 as a 30-year anniversary. And it is based on true events. It's alleged that it's loosely based. I don't know exactly what is and isn't factual. The beginning, it states that everything that is reported was documented and reenacted in the movie, save for the individuals who had their names changed. And at the very end, there's like a epilogue type deal where they talk about some of the people who were involved with the film and like the characters who were trying to track down the guy. And like it says that they died then, where, what they're doing now. Some died, some moved on, some are doing well, that kind of thing. So it's kind of got that little interesting feel to it. It's definitely, because of that, it's a lot different than your typical, 70s, 80s cult slasher film. And I like it. So I want to talk about the character. The antagonist, the killer, the phantom killer is what he's called. And obviously he has the sack on his head, a la Jason Voorhees, Friday 13th Part 2. However, I should say Jason Voorhees a la Phantom, to be honest, because it looks like all indications. They never said, though. They never, on any of the DVD commentaries, 30 years later, his name was Jason, all those documents, they never ever said it. They never came out and said it. But, I mean, come on, let's be real here. What are the odds that they didn't take some sort of, leisure with that as an inspiration? But he is an interesting figure. He doesn't speak much, but he does definitely remind me of Jason Ford. He doesn't speak at all, but he runs. He has human mannerisms, and for all counts, he's just a guy who's crazy with a bag on his head. He's not some hulking dude who seems to take all of this beatings and can stand right back up and like this, that, and the third. He doesn't seem to have any kind of, antagonist, monster, killer, armor, strength that, most of these antags do in horror movies, which is cool. I like humility among my villains in horror movies. I like the fact, the elements of being able to defeat the bad guy. And so, yeah, I think that it is a good thing, the fact that he's just this normal guy with a sack on his head. It also gives him that bit of ambiguity that he could just be, any person. And also, whenever he is on screen, a lot of the time there aren't necessarily POV shots, but you hear him breathing very heavily. And, ultimately, that's something we saw in like Halloween and several other notorious films. I believe in Black Christmas as well. For me, that's always effective. It's always something I enjoy for point of view type shots in like slasher films, to see the killer's perspective. And it's a very slight effect, but it's always been, something that I take a liking to and I appreciate. I think it adds to the tension and to the atmosphere and to the vibe. And the atmosphere in this film, Texarkana is kind of a pretty rural, swampy type area. There's a lot of scenes where he is out and about in the woods and the swamps, and it's always at night, hence the name Dreaded Sundown. And so the scenes are pretty intense, and they're pretty good. It opens off with a bang, right? Like, I mean, the first 10 minutes of the movie are pretty awesome. And I really appreciated how this movie just kind of shot right into it. There's a little bit of an introduction with the narration and all that stuff, but then it just cuts right to it. And yeah, I mean, I thought the violence there's not a lot of gore, but it's one of those situations where you don't necessarily need a lot of the gore. The kills, they're kind of another big notorious moment for this film, and something I was aware of before watching was the infamous trumpet kill, where he puts the knife in the horn and then just like blows. It's actually kind of funny because he tries it for like 6 or 7 times and like can't get it to work. It's actually pretty funny, but it's an insane kill. Very bizarre, but kind of fun, kind of cool, I guess. I mean, is it kind of stupid? Yeah, whatever. I mean, it's not a big deal. It's definitely something that is memorable and makes this film stand out, which is, I guess that's a good thing, right? When you're, it's 2020, you're revisiting a film that's 45 almost years old. No, I had a few qualms with the killer. He did use a gun, which, okay, I mean, it is what it is, right? I mean, he's a slasher, but he also does use a gun. Now, my thing is, the gun he uses, what fucking type of gun is that? Because there is, on his last little murder scene, if you will, where he targets the family in the house, he shoots the husband in the back of the head. He falls over. He's still moving. Shoots him again in the back of the head. He kills him. Okay. How does a gunshot to the back of the head not kill you right away? But it gets worse because he then proceeds to shoot the woman not once, but twice in the back of the head. And she is able to crawl away and survive. How? Like, what kind of gun are you using? Like, I looked it up because I was like, is it possible? Because apparently he has like a silenced 32. Is it possible to survive a gunshot to the head? And yeah, it is. It's regarded as a miracle, but I guess it is, right? But like the fact that she's able to just like crawl away like that, it's kind of bizarre. But she ends up escaping. And also like early on in the movie, like sandwiched in between, like he has like 3 or 4 encounters where he like kills people. And like on the second one, he actually, or maybe it's the first one, he doesn't actually kill the people, which was interesting. They ended up getting away. But another thing to talk about with this movie, to separate it from the slasher aspect, it also turns into a mystery film, because the other layer of this movie that I think is actually really fucking cool is the fact that it's a mystery film in a way that by the end of it is never solved. So, the killer, you don't ever get to see him unmasked. You don't ever get to see his, reasoning for doing what he does. You don't see any of that. At the very end of the movie, in a typical Texas kind of Western climax, quite literally shootout along a train, the sheriff, who had been called in to track this motherfucker down, shoots him because they're separated by train tracks as the train's going by. I thought for sure he would just hop on the train. I don't know why he didn't, if I'm the killer. But no, it's kind of a cool little scene. He shoots him underneath the train with like a 12-gauge shotgun and gets him right in the leg. And I'm like, okay, movie's over. Like, the train will eventually pass and he'll be, they'll catch him or whatever. And maybe that's how the movie will end. But no, like after the train passes, somehow the guy gets away. And you get to see footage of him, the killer, like running through the swamp, and then it cuts to the narration, and you know, that epilogue thing where they talk about they never found the killer. You know, people believe he's still out there. He could have gotten arrested, this, that, and the third. And then it goes into, you know, what happened to the police officers and the victims who were involved. And, you know, I think that the whole story, the layers of this film, the slasher aspects, the mystery aspects, the lack of a main character, the, you know, interesting mystique of the killer and the mystery there, the ambiguity of him, the spectacle. I think it kind of culminates into a must-see slasher horror classic. I think that's true, because it is absolutely not your typical slasher movie, because it's almost it's like a documentary. It really is, but it's like if a documentary in a slasher film had a love child. Out came The Town That Dreaded Sundown. Definitely a quality film, and I really enjoyed it. I did. You know, its weak spots, maybe some of the execution, you know, the kills, that kind of thing. The acting at times was a little but it was a super low budget film. Had like I think a $500,000 budget, so I can respect it in that aspect. And you know, the lack of a traditional main set of characters, yeah, you know, whatever. And at times during some of the moments of tension, like the kill scenes, if you will, I thought some of the shots were a little kind of hodgepodgey and not the greatest, but at the same time, I was legitimately tense watching those scenes, and I thought, you know, a lot of them were pretty suspenseful, and they're, you know, based on the fact that some of the people did get away. You had a legitimate bit of curiosity there. Okay, is this person going to make it out? And so I respect, they say it's based off a true story and it follows the events, like, you know, faithfully, but even still, I respect the director, screenwriter, whoever, for making, you know, the killer not successful in every one of his endeavors, because that definitely added to, you know, the tension and the suspense and the thrill of watching, you know, this killer stalk and chase after their victims. But yeah, Town That Dreaded Sundown, I liked it. I would definitely recommend it to a horror fan. Would definitely recommend it. I would recommend it. I wouldn't say definitely. I'd recommend it to a movie fan. I think I would recommend it to a friend of mine. I think to a casual viewer, they might be able to get some enjoyment out of it. All in all, I think it's definitely a cult classic. Whether its popularity is based on Friday the 13th Part 2, or just, you know, the fact that it's based on a true story, or, you know, it's just a run-of-the-mill similar to, you know, Alice, Sweet Alice. It's just one of those 70s horror films that kind of caught fire, and people are like, hey, this film exists, and it's pretty fucking good. And I happen to be part of all of those majorities. I think it all kind of comes together. And it is definitely 70s horror classic. I'm going to give it it's between 4 and 4.5. I'm gonna give it 4 stars. Yeah, we'll probably watch this movie at some point in the future.